Good morning and welcome. Thank you so much for being here. This month, we are exploring the theme of gratefulness, more particularly the principles and practices we can apply to create more space in our hearts, in our interior lives, so that we can live with the peace and equanimity that flows from a life gratefully lived, that help us maintain this peace in the midst of everything that life hands us. And it seems that lately life has been handing us quite a lot. And so more and more, we need to take a look at the different wisdom traditions that give us these tools. Author Kurt Vonnegut once wrote that we have to continually be jumping off cliffs and developing our wings on the way down. I love that image. It tells me that so often when we are forced to jump off that cliff, make that change, experience that loss, whatever it is, we don't think we have the ability to weather it. We don't yet have our wings. We just have to know that we will develop them as we fall. Life pushes us off that cliff and we have to learn to fly. That is a great metaphor for our lives because we are always developing those wings. We need the tools that enable us to keep going in confidence and without fear. When we have found the tools that work for us, we can maintain our balance in all circumstances. The wings we develop help us live lives that are larger, more happy, more full. There are so many wisdom paths and traditions that give us these wings. Today, I want to talk about philosophy, more particularly about Stoic philosophy. So before you all decide that that's all you want to hear and there's something way more interesting happening in the next room, let's consider the possibility that philosophy gets a bad rap. We may have an image of it as a discipline, which is kind of quaint, a holdover from times past, not really suited to our world today of space travel and quantum theory and iPhones. A philosophy, perhaps, that is just mired in high-minded irrelevancies that mean nothing to actual lives here on the ground. So let me give you an example. If your best friend came up to you and announced that her daughter was going into pre-med in order to become a brain surgeon, you would be thrilled. That is great. What an accomplishment. That is wonderful. Contrast this with your best friend confiding in you that her smart and accomplished daughter is pursuing a degree in college in philosophy. I think you'd be offering your condolences and imagining this young woman's future looking for gainful employment. Philosophy gets a bad rap, but let's not sell it short. Think of it in the way you think of spirituality, a way to see your world that helps you live with balance and joy and peace. Surely we pay attention to such wisdom. The Greek Stoics had the same investment in the study and practice of philosophy, the same belief that this discipline would ground and indeed transform their lives. They regarded the study and daily practice of philosophy as absolutely essential to living a life of happiness, or what they called eudaimonia. Indeed, it was so important that they encouraged us to put it before everything else. What, after all, they asked, can be more important than the question of how we live our lives? We ask ourselves that same question. Major Stoic philosophers have included Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, Cato the Younger, Zeno, and Epictetus. The philosophy has been with us since about 350 BCE and is undergoing a renaissance these days. Why? Because in a world that seems to be spiraling out of control, Stoicism gives control and balance back to us and reminds us that we never lost them. Stoicism is practical, it is comprehensive, and its benefits are immediate. As a supremely pragmatic group, Stoics believed that the goal of any philosophy is to enable us to live a happy life. That is great. The goal of philosophy is to enable us to be happy. Indeed, if your philosophy does not result in a happy and meaningful life, they urged us to forget it and find another one. Any useful philosophy must fit our nature as rational human beings, or it doesn't fit at all. The Stoics speak to our reason as our saving faculty, and their practices teach us how we can discipline and develop it. So let's talk about reason. That's another word that sometimes gets a bad rap, especially in spiritual circles. We may think of it as anti-spiritual or as non-spiritual as spirituality is in the greater consciousness, the heart, places we can't reach with our thinking minds. I can say that I am spiritual. My emphasis is on being spiritual, not rational. Okay, I hope we don't set up such a false dichotomy. We would be adrift without our rational ability. It is our reason that helps us to organize and understand our emotions and our experiences. Our reason persuades us of the utility, for example, of peace over conflict, virtue over venality. Our rational ability and our hearts have to inform and balance each other. And that may, in fact, be the essence of a balanced life. The Stoics believed that nature gave us the ability to reason, and our lives improve when we train it and use it well. That sounds simple, but it's a lifelong task. It's a practice. It's a discipline. We're not born knowing how to do this. We're born with the capacity to do it, but we are not born knowing how to do this. We have to work at it and learn, and that is the practice of philosophy. Indeed, the Stoics taught us it was a daily practice. So what is this Stoic philosophy and what does it do for us? Well, first, let's talk about what it isn't. It is not keeping a stiff upper lip when you bash your hand with a hammer. It is not being an emotionless automaton. Stoics have emotions and they show them and are thoroughly engaged in all aspects of life. However, the philosophy encourages us to practice principles that prevent our emotions from running our lives. That's a key. Instead, we cultivate awareness, clarity, and mental tranquility, even in the midst of chaos. A central Stoic precept is, the winds may howl, but I will not be swept away. I love that. The winds may howl, but I will not be swept away. The first lesson Stoicism teaches us, which we here at One World know well, is to put our effort, focus, and energy on those things we can control and forget the rest. Easier said than done. As Epictetus said, we must make the best of those things that are in our power and take the rest as nature gives us. The analogy he gives is that of a ship's journey. When he chose to set out on a journey, he could choose the ship and make sure it was seaworthy. He could choose the pilot and find the best man that he could. He could select the most auspicious time to travel based on what he knew about weather, tides, traffic, or other variables. That's it. Whether he makes it to the other shore or not depends on so many factors beyond his control. A storm could blow up. He could be knocked overboard. The pilot he selected may get ill or die, and a substitute may be called in who's not as skilled. The winds may not blow. Why spend energy on eventualities you cannot affect? You have done all you can. Put your energy where it can make a difference, and don't waste time focusing on areas you can't control. Give it no energy. That is so easy to say, but it is so tough to do. That's why I'm mentioning it here, even though we have had many talks and many speakers sharing this lesson. I am betting the minute I started talking about the lack of control, you're like, oh my God, why is she talking about this again? We talk about this all the time. It's a lesson we need to be reminded of every day, even now, gives me examples, small and not so small, of how I have failed to live up to this precept. Think about your own life. Think about your day as you sit here on a Sunday morning watching me talk about this. What have you worried about today which was completely outside your control? I'm betting that I am not the only one who has done this. The fact is that we have very little control over the circumstances of our lives. We have some, but not a great deal. But the good news here is that we control entirely what is the most important aspect of this, how we choose to see and respond to our world. No matter our circumstances, our response is entirely within our control, and no one can take that away. We often say that again, but the challenge is to hear it and internalize it, because sometimes we hand that power away. Although we know that we have this power, we still worry over so many things that are outside our control. Those we love may get sick. We may lose a job or suffer some other reversals. Events in our world will lead to tragedy and disorder and chaos. So what do the Stoics teach us here? They say, yes, all these things may happen. So because their system of philosophy is supremely pragmatic, they give us disciplines to prepare ourselves so that we are not swept away when these winds howl. First, they urge us to face the possibilities head on. In a practice they call premeditatio malorum, or meditating on evils and troubles, they encourage us to consider those outcomes that we fear calmly and intentionally. You know, it seems so counterintuitive to tell ourselves to meditate on all the things we fear, but that's how we see them clearly. That's how we get past the fear that they may happen and accept that they may, and yet realize that we can get through them. We review all the possibilities so that if one occurs, we are not taken by surprise. We are ready. Seneca wrote, "What is quite unlooked for is more crushing in its effect, and unexpectedness adds to the weight of a disaster. This is a reason for ensuring that nothing ever takes us by surprise. We should project our thoughts ahead of us at every turn and have in mind every possible eventuality instead of only the usual course of events. Rehearse them in your mind. Exile, torture, war, shipwreck, all the terms of our human lot should be before our eyes." Now, we can update that list: exile, torture, war, and shipwreck. There's lots of things in our lives which may come, which would be tragedies or chaotic, or which would impose disorder in our world. But it doesn't change the lesson. It still benefits us to look at them calmly and dispassionately as events that might occur. We then are not surprised. We then are not knocked over so much if they do happen. When we do that, when we have sat with what might actually happen, we move through that fear to a place of clarity. When we are clear, we become aware that if it happens, we can get through it. We look at it and we say, I can do that. I can get through that. We have faced it clearly. Conversely, if it doesn't happen, we have cause for gratitude about the blessings in our lives. Something turned out well. The ship made it. The crop didn't fail. We lived. Our family member recovered. It could have been otherwise. This ability to be ruthlessly clear about the fragility of life enabled Stoic practitioners to draw all the more joy from it. It did not turn them into a grim lot. It turned them into folks who were more clear about life, who were more joyful about life. Every moment mattered. Life can be short. Live it with joy in the moment and gratitude for all that we have. Second, the Stoics teach us to carefully and clearly examine what is before us without being diverted by assumptions or fears. Epictetus here said, "Don't let the force of an impression when it first hits you knock you off your feet. Just say to it, hold on for a moment. Let me see who you are and what you represent. Let me put you to the test." How often have we been assailed by an event or an emotion and we instantly respond, we instantly react? What the Stoics here are encouraging us to do is take a beat. Look at what is happening. Be aware of what we are telling ourselves about this event. What am I feeling? What am I telling myself happened? Is that consistent with the evidence or is it not? Am I correct? Look at what is happening in all its aspects. We don't put our heads down, afraid to look, but being preoccupied by what we fear this thing is. Seneca, again, knew this and said, "Some things torment us more than they ought. Some torment us before they ought, and some torment us when they ought not to torment us at all. We are in the habit of exaggerating or imagining or anticipating sorrow." In the past, I have called this awfulizing. And I have also reminded us how amazingly efficient we are at this. We create future events to fear, and then we spend a lot of energy fearing them. Mark Twain put it this way. He said, My life has been filled with tragedies, most of which never happened. How our lives are improved when we can lift up our heads and see clearly what is going on around us. Third, the Stoics teach us to be grateful for all of life, all that happens, not to love the good news and avoid the bad, but to realize the gift in all of it. The Stoic principle embodied here is what they called Amor Fati, or love of fate. We welcome life as it happens, all of it. We don't wish for something else to have happened. We welcome what is happening. The Stoics believed that the events coming at us are our greatest teachers, and challenges in life are not simply to be tolerated, but are to be welcomed. Marcus Aurelius put it this way: a blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it. All that life hands us is an opportunity to learn more about how to live fully and well. Remember, Stoics' goal is to live a life that is happy. And we cannot be happy if we are upended by every challenge or difficulty, if we fall victim to fear. Epictetus gives us a wonderful image for approaching life's difficulties. He taught it this way. He said that everything has two handles, the one by which it may be carried, the other by which it cannot. If your brother acts unjustly, don't lay hold on the action by the handle of his injustice, for by that it cannot be carried, but by the opposite, that he is your brother, that he was brought up with you, and thus you will lay hold on it as it is to be carried. Every situation has these two handles. We get to choose which handle we will grasp when approaching any life challenge, the one that leads to anger or fear, or the one that leads to appreciation and growth. Each situation has two, and we have the freedom to choose which one we will reach for to pick up this event. Modern day Stoic Ryan Holiday wrote a while back about a gratitude practice he uses based on this principle of Amor Fati, or love of fate. Instead of listing those positives in his life, for which he was surely grateful, he modified his list to identify those challenges, disappointments, or outright failures that had been his best teachers. What was he doing here? He was selecting the handle by which he would grasp these events in his life, and he was transforming them into lessons, into teachers, into growth. He reflected on what each had taught him, how he had learned through them to live a life of greater happiness. This is how the Stoics teach us that life can be more. And really what I've given you here is just a brief summary. I encourage you to read more of the Stoics. And we have some of their books in our resource list, but there is so much richness in this wisdom tradition. Even in a world in which our control may be limited, they teach us that we have the option to see life in a way that is unlimited. It takes practice and discipline, but we can do it. So on this Thanksgiving week, let's recognize that we have so much to be grateful for. The people and the comforts in our lives that lift us up, as well as all that threatens to weigh us down. The Stoics give us valuable tools for lifting even these by the right handle and using them to become happier and wiser and more peaceful. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving.